about anything, quite frankly. There's a lot I need to talk to you about tonight. 10 days to go to the election. I'll cross live in a second to our political correspondent for that, but also just to remind you, you can email gbviews@gbnews.com. You can go to the website gbnews.com/yoursay, or you can tweet or X me. But now let's catch up with Olivia. She's been following the campaign trail today. Olivia, what have we missed?
Well, it's been yet another busy day on the campaign trail. Labour have been keen to talk about their new plan for NHS dentistry. There are some shocking statistics around emergency dentistry for children in particular. The most common reason that children between the ages of 6 and 10 go to A&E is because they need a tooth extracted. And Labour has said, Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, Keir Starmer have both said that they want to end the dentistry desert. Now, part of that is this policy to put in place supervised toothbrushing for primary school aged children, and they want to bring in 3,000 new dentistry graduates to work in the areas where specifically dentistry is proving a huge problem, Stoke-on-Trent, Filton among them. But of course the headlines haven't really been focused on that. Westminster hasn't really been focused on that. We've all been looking at yet another day in this gambling scandal. Now, the Prime Minister has tried to get on the front foot on this at last and has launched a CCHQ investigation into what went on. At the moment, he's caught in a bit of a bind because he says that while the investigation is ongoing, he can't really comment on the matter and he won't be suspending candidates. He went as far as to say that if they were found to be guilty of this, they would be leaving the party immediately, and he said he was furious about the whole thing. But for Labour, that isn't enough, and I think for quite a lot of voters that won't be enough either. They suggest that that these candidates should be kicked out of the party immediately, and so the row rumbles on. Will this CCHQ investigation be wrapped up any quicker than the official investigation, and will Rishi Sunak have an answer on this by the election, which, as we know, is in just 10 days' time? Rishi Sunak has said that he doesn't know of any other MPs who are tangled up, embroiled in all of this, but perhaps you wouldn't really expect him to. He didn't know, of course, that his own PPS was involved in this. He has made clear as well to journalists that he himself didn't put a bet on the date of the election. So I guess he can be counting some small blessings today at the end of another very, very difficult day on the campaign trail.
Indeed, thank you very much for all of that, Olivia. I've got to say, I mean, we touched on this betting scandal when it started happening. It is such an appalling, low-rent way to kind of be remembered. What do you feel about this?
So I'm all for betting. I used to work in a bookies and a casino, and I will reveal right now on GB News, I had a bet on the general election a year ago. I bet my last sort of £3 in an online account that the Tory party would win the most seats. Have a feeling that one will be less successful than some of the other bets that have been put on this week. It's shocking. I mean, and the thing that I don't understand about it is just the level of stupidity involved to do it, knowing there's a decent chance you'll get caught, but also the amounts that have been put on it, sort of like £100 bet here and there. If it was a life-changing amount that might change your life, it might be worth the risk, but otherwise, why risk your reputation for
Well, it seems like people have been doing, it looks like people may have been doing lots of different small amounts to try and go undetected, perhaps. I just think it is so low rent. Look, the IFS, they've been speaking out today about these manifestos, Tory and Labour, and essentially saying that there's a conspiracy of silence when it comes to tax rises, spending plans, so on and so forth. Are we seeing honesty, Paul, in these manifestos?
No, I don't think either of the main parties are being upfront about the massive levels of investment that are needed to turn our economy and our country around. I think this country is in a sharp decline, and you don't get through that by tinkering at the edges. You need serious investment in our services, in our infrastructure. We've got sluggish growth in the economy, and that tinkering at the edges is not going to solve the problems, the fundamental problems I think that our economy has got. We need bold thinking. We haven't had much of that. We've had a few kind of platitudes and a few sort of promises in the manifesto, which are in various manifestos, both parties, which are OK as far as they go, but I don't really think get to the heart of our economic problems as a society. And the platitudes are not good enough. We're in a situation where, as I said, we're in sharp decline. And so many things in this country have just ceased working. I mean, the NHS record waiting lists, you can't get an appointment with your GP. We've just heard about the dentistry scandal. Housing, we've got a chronic housing shortage. Young people, young families just simply can't get on the housing ladder. People are paying extortionate rents. And I feel, Michelle, this is almost like a 1945 moment where the country was on its knees after the war, needed huge investment, huge rebuilding, a massive project, and no one has quite grasped the scale of that. And what we're seeing is I think, not good enough. We're not seeing the kind of radical thinking and bold ideas that we need. I mean, both party leaders constantly talk about bold plans, but actually they haven't really got any, let's be blunt.
Yeah, no.
So there are a lot of things I agree with Paul on this. I think boldness is absolutely needed now. You know, you mentioned the sort of 1945 rebuild, and I think the post-COVID kind of era was always going to be kind of akin to that economically, to really make sure that the British economy is firing on all cylinders, but is working for people right across the country as well. I was levelling up minister. I know we're going to talk about that specifically later, but that's a sort of project that needs that bold thinking that Paul's spoken about to really address the kind of inequality of opportunities across the country. When it comes to the kind of specifics around tax and spending, I do kind of feel in a way that as a country we have kind of lost sight of the arguments that the Conservative Party was making back in sort of 2010 right through to 2015 around how important it actually is that a government does balance the books here. But balancing the books isn't just about tax and spend, it's about growth as well. Because as we know, if you grow the economy, the whole pie gets bigger, there's more to go around for everyone.
Yeah.
And the parties are talking about growth, but I haven't really seen any firm, tangible, bold plans that I think are really going to deliver that.
Well, a lot of what the Labour manifesto, has in there is kind of dependent on growth in the economy. And I guess this is one of the questions that people have. That's fascinating if you get your growth, but if you don't, then what are you going to do? And this is why a lot of people, Paul, believe that they're going to be tax rises that people are just not referencing in those manifestos.
Well, it's depressing when Rachel Reeves says we'll spend on public services once we achieve growth. Well, the point is, how do you achieve growth? You know, we were hit by a recession recently. People forget that. We've got a flatlining economy. The way that you recover quickly out of recession and you get growth is by spending on infrastructure, on public works, on investing in public services and so on, by getting real wages rising. That's how you stimulate the economy. That's how you improve the situation and you create more buoyant tax revenues, which then gives you the opportunity to spend more. So saying we'll spend once we get economic growth, I think undoes everything that we've learned about economics over the last century, which is that when you've got a flatlining economy, government as an active agent needs to intervene to stimulate the economy, and that means spending money. The quickest way out of a recession and a sluggish economy, a downturning economy, is to spend. That's the reality.
Short term maybe, but longer term we do have an issue here, don't we? Which is where our monthly sort of debt repayments are higher than our education budget. And the more we borrow, the worse that's going to get unless we really do get that long-term growth. And my concern is that if we just keep borrowing on a short-term scale, it will never be achievable. And we're just storing ourselves a problem for future generations.
One of the things that I think is quite interesting is everyone just kind of has accepted the situation that we're in. You know, you're talking about post-World War II recoveries and all the rest of it. This whole absolute destroying of our economy was a political choice. And everyone seems to have kind of gone to sleep and forgotten about that and just marched forward. The choices that were made by both parties, actually, everyone seemed to be in cahoots that actually we need to close everything down and go harder and deeper for as long as possible. I'm astonished, actually, that people don't seem to be pushing back on the two main leaders about the choices that they made then that have led to the scenario that we found ourselves in now.
Well, the COVID inquiry is going on right now and is a long inquiry.
But it's laughable, though, because it's focusing on who texted who what. It's pathetic. It should have been focusing on stuff like, should we ever, en masse, have been repeatedly and prolongingly locked down because of COVID? It doesn't ask that serious question.
I think, though, when you go back to the situation, particularly that first lockdown, which I think is the one that was probably the hardest for so many of us, we didn't know. There were so many unknowns here. And I guess when you're looking at scientific modelling that says this many people might die when you are in that position, and I had to take these decisions, I had to stand up in Parliament and make these decisions. If that was on your head and you knew that might be on your head, I wouldn't have made the decision any differently with the information I had then. When it came, if I may, Michelle, when it came to the later lockdowns, I was pushing back saying we shouldn't be doing these regional lockdowns. We should be allowing hospitality to open. You know, of course we support people who are shielding, we support the most vulnerable. But what about the impact on hospitality? What about the impact on young people? What about the impact on education? So, you know, no easy decisions to make at that point for anyone.
Yeah, but
I don't think any politician took them lightly either.
Alternate views were absolutely silenced during that debate. So it's all well and good saying the scientists said this and that and the other, but there was a lot of scientists who were also undermined and shamed in some ways, but certainly silenced. But you lots at home, whenever I start on my little COVID rants, I can almost hear you groaning from the studio because you go, oh, Michelle, get over it, move on.